Right. So we are trying to develop a new technique using acoustic waves to separate microplastic from contaminated water.
Hello, I'm Hadley Marchek from the American Chemical Society. Welcome to this media briefing from ACS Spring 2023. Colorful particles of plastic drift along under the surface of most waterways, all the way from headwater streams out to the Arctic Ocean. And these microplastics, which are less than 5 millimeters wide, are potentially harmful to aquatic animals and plants, as well as humans. So researchers are trying to develop different ways to remove microplastics from the environment, as well as stop them at their source. Today, a team is reporting a two-stage device made with steel tubes and pulsing sound waves that removes microplastic particles in water samples. We're joined today by Menake Piyasena and Nelum Pereira from New Mexico Tech. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Menake, how did you get the idea for this project?
Well, you might have noticed that in the last few years, there were many news articles and documentaries reporting how oceans are getting polluted due to plastic debris. So if you search the internet, you can find many video clips showing plastic water bottles, food packages, grocery bags, and other plastic waste floating on various water bodies, and then their effect on aquatic life. So those are the major plastic pollutants that people knowingly or unknowingly throw into the environment. So then we have plastic ingredients coming from personal care products. So it took our attention to the long-term effect of these plastic wastes on the nature, which included the formation of microplastics. So those are the small plastic particles with a size less than 5 millimeters. So then we were talking to a colleague who was interested in decomposing isolated microplastics chemically, because most microplastics do not decompose naturally. So then this idea came: what if we use acoustic waves to concentrate these microplastic suspended in water? Because we are doing research on utilizing acoustic waves to concentrate biological cells and perform biological reactions on them. So we thought, what if we can use the same method to concentrate microplastics? So I think that is how we started exploring this idea further.
And so how do acoustic waves or acoustic forces focus particles together? And what's the advantage of this approach for removing microplastics from water?
So when we create stand-in acoustic waves in a resonating chamber using acoustic transducers attached to the chamber, it can create acoustic forces on particles. So these particles can move into selected regions of the acoustic wave. So it's like having a magnet and magnetic particles. So magnetic particles will be attracted to the magnet due to magnetic forces. So very similarly, particles will be attracted to the selected positions on the acoustic wave. So we call these positions as nodes. And if these particles are suspended in a liquid like water and move into a tube, we can focus them into specific pads along the tube. So this is what we call acoustic focusing of particles. So still, this is in the early stage of the design. However, we think the main advantage of this approach is the ability to design a flow-through chamber and its simplicity. Since there is no mesh or physical filters involved, typically used in water purification, it will minimize the clogging and do not need to replace parts regularly. So we think that our approach will be cost-effective and simple.
And so how does the device that you have developed actually remove the microplastics from water?
So, as Dr. Piyasena mentioned before, acoustic forces can be used to manipulate particles in a flow system. Therefore, we first explored the possibility of concentrating and removing microplastics using microscale devices that we already have in our lab. And then we modified our approach by connecting two devices together to separate microplastics. So when the density of contaminated water is similar to pure water, all microplastics come out of the middle outlet. But change in the density of the contaminated water will make different sizes of microplastic to focus to different planes of the device. So small microplastics were concentrated to the middle line of the device, and large microplastics were concentrated along the sides of the device. So as you can see from the slide and on the left side, small microplastics can be removed from the middle outlet of the first stage, and the large microplastics can be removed from the two lateral outlets of the second stage, so that we can obtain microplastic-free water from the middle outlet of the second stage under the acoustic on conditions. So if the density of the contaminated water is similar to pure water, all microplastics will come out of the middle outlet of the first stage. After figuring that out, then we scaled up the device using 8mm steel tubes, and you can see the focused microplastics in the steel tube device on the bottom right side of the slide.
And so how much water are you able to clean at a time with the steel tube device?
So still we have only the prototype device, and using the prototype device that we have already, we were able to clean 1 liter of water contaminated with microplastics in less than 90 minutes. The tube size plays a major role deciding how much water we can clean, and we expect by having multiple tubes bundled together, we can increase the rate of removing microplastics.
And so you've tested your prototype device then on real-world water samples from both a pond at your university as well as water from the Rio Grande. Can you explain what you did and some of those results?
Yeah, so first we collected water samples from a pond in the university and Rio Grande River. Then we filtered the water samples to remove large debris. Then we spiked microplastics to the samples and introduced the samples to the steel tube devices. And upon the application of acoustic waves, we could remove more than 80% of microplastics using the setup.
And so what are some of the applications for this device? Where do you expect it could be used?
Acoustic focusing has already been utilized in concentrating biological particles like blood cells and other cells for various purposes like sample purification and diagnostic applications. So the current device that we use to separate microplastic is customized to this particular application. So however, we are designing different types of acoustic devices to do biological reactions in involving biological particles.
And what are some of the next steps for your project then?
The next steps include designing a large-scale device, of course, and that can be utilized at higher fluid flow rates. And also, we would like to use it for actual water samples that are contaminated with microplastics.
And so what kind of water would you be able to clean up then?
So we will try to use ocean water.
And finally, what do you want viewers to take away from our talk today?
So microplastic contaminants in water can lead to disease conditions like cancer. And scientists have already found these microplastics in human blood. And that is why we need to minimize the use of plastics. And since these microplastics are emerging as a major contaminant in aquatic systems, it is necessary to find new methods to remove microplastics from contaminated water. So even though our system is still in the developing stage, we envision that this method could be useful in removing microplastics in contaminated water. So our effort is to improve our prototype device to remove microplastics at the point of generation. For example, concentrating and removing microplastics in water from laundry outlets. So we hope we can contribute to removing microplastics with our technique in the near future.
That's so great. Thank you so much for sharing about your research with me today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for having us.
Be sure to check out our other media briefings for ACS Spring 2023, which will be posted throughout the meeting at www.acs.org/briefings. patreon.com/ACS Spring 2023 Briefings.